All right. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Today's going to be an interesting one. We've got Arnold Lee, the co-founder of Sphere. Sphere's a payment platform, and it won the payments track back in the Summer Camp Hackathon. It's a project that came full circle to ended up being a sponsor in the Radar Hackathon. It's a good example of what kind of success a team can have winning a hackathon. Arnold's here today to share some of the hard-earned lessons he learned along the way. So with that, I'll hand it over and we can get started.
Amazing. Thanks for the intro, Mike. And sorry to those in the audience for wasting the first 15 minutes of what I believe is 4 p.m. Eastern. I'm currently in Dubai. I just got back from Abu Dhabi. It's about midnight here. And so hopefully I'll make the rest of the hour worth your time, inshallah. So I'm Arnold, CEO, co-founder of Sphere. As Mike mentioned, we won the Summer Camp Hackathon for payments. Was it 2 years ago now? I kind of forget. But it was before the FTX blow up. And what the title of this talk is How to Not Die. And that hopefully I'll be able to share some stories that coalesce into some principles for how, we're still a company that's growing. There's still a realistic chance that we could die. Hopefully I learned something from it. Hopefully you guys learned something from it too. Because frankly, in our cohort, so to speak, of that hackathon, there aren't that many companies left. Other names from that time, Tensor, now building Vector, Lulo, whom some of you guys might use for stablecoin yield generation. And I might be forgetting one or two others, but there aren't that many left. And I think it's a combination of adaptability. Most oftentimes what you choose to build first, like when I see a deck for a pre-seed or seed company, I just assume that you guys are going to change the idea. Because it'd be crazy if you were able to kind of sit in the nether, in the void, and come up with something that the world needs. I'll share a brief story about how we ended up on Sphere in its current iteration today to hopefully drive that message in. Relative to the other, I suppose, talks that are being done here, I'm hoping to do a lot of Q&A because I feel like the most interesting discussions are when you guys ask real-time questions. But I should probably give you some context first, so that way there's something to ask about. When we first started, we didn't really have a lot of conviction in payments within crypto, but we had a lot more conviction in it than anything else that we had tried to do before. Before Jito existed, you could still spam validator nodes and try to get your transactions in to arbitrage across dexes. Back then, Jupiter didn't exist either. And the lesson from Arnold and my co-founder, Luigi, who's my best friend from college, is to try a lot of things. And most oftentimes, other people are trying them too, or have tried them. There's a whole graveyard typically that you don't see because you have hopefully the gift of naivete, and oftentimes are taking something that's been done in a slightly different flavor than before and just trying it in a different version of the world. And maybe that's what is the why now for why your idea will work. But when we tried it, crypto was still suffering from Terra Luna. This is back when people called SBF the JP Morgan of crypto because he was buying a lot of things up. And so, we reasoned, well, Stripe sponsored this hackathon. What would Stripe want? In retrospect, this was a terrible idea. We tried to win this hackathon. Frankly, we just wanted an honorable mention. So that way, when I went back to grad school, my Luigi went to go theoretically work for Drift Protocol. Shout outs to David, who very kindly facilitated and encouraged him to come and do Sphere. We reasoned, okay, well, Stripe wants this, so let's build a Stripe for crypto, which was the first mistake. And if we kept going down that path, we would have definitely died. Because it turns out that everyone's bullish on crypto payments until they try and create a crypto payments company. And then you realize that there's basically no moat. What you're selling is like a front end, and on the back end is a blockchain. But like Web3, JS has like a single line transfer function. So why can't everyone else in the world make that? And so it's really hard to drive margins. I'm not sure if they're in the audience right now, but at the time it was like us, Umang, and his team from CandyPay, Helio. There was Coinable, which was kind of like a Shopify for crypto back then. TJ and Greg were still working on Mountain Pay. There was a whole cohort of people working on crypto payments. And I think what none of us really realize is that it's very difficult to have pricing power on a typical merchant payment, with the exception of the areas where there's already a ton, like think unicorn level distribution, aka Shopify. Then you have meaningful pricing power. And so in retrospect, we ended up winning this hackathon kind of like out of luck. I still remember getting the news at an airport and frankly just being shocked. And because the market kind of like thought it was interesting, we really went and continued down the road of building the Stripe for crypto. All the different feature sets that you might expect, from build, subscription payments to a very slick gateway that orchestrates across multiple chains. And we could have saved probably 8 to 10 months if we just realized the cold hard truth that we didn't really want to stare at, which was that even in the MVPs, it's like people were willing to talk to us because I think in theory, they also thought that crypto payments was interesting, but very rarely did anyone try to give us money. Very rarely did anyone, beat us down the door to get access to our product. It was more of a nice to have. And, the temptation was, if you like really build out this product, maybe then people will come. I think that once your brain starts going down this path of thinking, you should be very, very paranoid. It's very rare that a very slick version of a bad idea will suddenly become a good idea. And there are exceptions, for what it's worth. The things that work are always about exceptions. And that's kind of the temptation. But if it turns out that even a very bad, hastily created version of your thing doesn't work, maybe there isn't as much demand as you thought. And maybe it's just like a value added service and kind of like a feature as opposed to an independent company. And so, to this day, we still have a lot of temptations. There are a bunch of product lines that at least one person in the world wants. I think one way to not die is to really stress test how real that demand is. What are some scenarios that you can come up with to save yourself a bunch of time writing code, doing product design, trying to distribute? Are there ways that you can hack to test, poke at the elephant and see if there's real demand? That's a good way to preserve runway. That's a good way to preserve your sanity, because otherwise you might end up building something like very pretty that people like kind of want, but they don't, have this hair on fire problem for. And until you find that hair on fire problem, it's very unlikely that you'll be able to keep a sustainable company or grow that into either what people call like a lifestyle business, meaning it's not at venture scale, or building a venture scale outcome, which is what I assume a lot of the people who go down the startup path actually want to do. So today we do a lot of on and off ramps. If you go to spherepay.co/ramp, you can like move USDC into your bank account, Tether, pick your favorite stablecoin, and vice versa. How did we land on this? Maybe this is a good segue into a second general principle. First principle one is like be brutally honest with yourself about whether or not there's real demand and try to find hacks to test it. The second, maybe before going into the second thing, if CT loves the idea, kind of like trading, if you guys are in that world, very rarely is there juice left to squeeze. As an example, today stablecoins are really hot. When we first started doing a stablecoin business, this was right after Circle Depact, which is when we got our first funds in. It was a very dumb idea to do stablecoins, like objectively. And yet we had the blessing and curse of having finished a fundraise, convinced some of the smartest people we knew to quit their jobs. And so we kind of like had no choice but to figure out what would work or return the money, which we just had spent the last 8 months trying to convince people that Solana was not dead and that, there was a future to blockchain and payments. So the sunk cost at the time propelled us to really dig into stablecoins in a world where, even the main like legit quote unquote one, Circle, right, can't even hold its peg. And everyone was sussed out by Tether. Today, stablecoins are really hot, which is always very concerning because it means that a lot of the juice has been squeezed out. And potentially there is another fruit next to the one that everyone's trying to juice. But if CT broadly agrees with what you're building and there isn't some controversy behind the thesis, or everyone seems to think it's a good idea, I'd be very careful. I'd really try to figure out how do you like try to get money out of them, which is like a good proxy, not the only proxy for what it's worth, for testing whether or not people actually want the thing that it is that you're building. So to segue into the second general principle, We timing works out actually well here. We had raised the money. We realized that like there are like 30 companies left on blockchain, and like no one really wants to talk to us. It feels like we're annoying them when we reach out to them, which is again a very bad sign that maybe what you're building isn't what people want. If you have to like really bend over backwards to convince anyone to even try the thing, be very careful, by the way, of sending stuff to your friends, because your friends are incentivized to encourage you. Like no one wants to blow up a friendship over a product idea, and the market will eventually deliver you the correct opinion, whether you realize it or not. Try to give it to like your worst enemy anonymously, because then you'll get the real, honest, cold hard truth. And it's a great way to save yourself time. It's a great way to understand maybe where their line of reasoning ends up. But at the time, no one really wanted to talk to us. And so we ended up getting some random DMs, random emails from people we had never heard of outside of crypto. These guys were running way more successful businesses than what we were used to. They had real users, they had real revenue, and these were businesses that just made a ton of sense. Think like someone shipping bananas from country A to country B because people in the second country want bananas and they can't grow them locally. And stablecoins were quite interesting to them because it was very difficult for them to access dollars, and local currency would float around too much, making it difficult for them to keep track of how much money that they're actually making, and preserve the value within it. And so we ended up really investing in this audience. And I think that for us, it was kind of like we had no other choice. But when you try to connect the dots looking backwards, the realization is that there was a huge structural deficiency at play, which is that, if you're like a smart person, let's say you went to Stanford or MIT or the equivalent in your country, and, you're thinking about what you should like work on, like no one wants to build government software for like Iowa, right? Like, no one who's smart like sees SBF blow up FTX and like crypto go down super bad, and macro just like get hurt as well. No one like who's smart and competent, capable. I'll like posit no one, not most people who fit in that category, like really wanted to build on chain. It was kind of like a scam to even really dive into the blockchain because so many people had lost their wealth. And again, in retrospect, it made a ton of sense why we had a structural advantage in kind of going down and exploring these branches, because there were not that many people doing it. And the beauty of having a ton of time, because no one really wants to talk to you, is you can actually check that graveyard of previous companies who had tried something like what we were doing. And you can start to think about why those graveyards exist. Why did those companies stop working, or go out of business, or maybe they blew up? And that was the case for stablecoins, which was Prime Trust had gone bankrupt because of a balance sheet issue when everything crashed. Fortress was getting acquired by Ripple and had an issue for fraud on their balance sheets. Zero Hash was still in market, but was super expensive, and so there wasn't a great choice for being able to move in and out of stablecoins. This is about when companies like Bridge, which you might have seen, get acquired by Stripe for $1 billion, and their most expensive acquisition ever, started to pop up and also pivot away from like the NFT checkout thing that they had done before. And so as you like go down and explore your given, I suppose, idea, I would think very carefully about what are the structural reasons that it makes sense for you to have stumbled on something that no one else in the world has. Or why you're trying something that in a way that no one in the world is currently doing. Crowdfunding, for example, is something that has existed for a really long time. So like, why is Echo working? Why does it seem to have product market fit? Maybe it doesn't. But if you try to make an argument for why it does, perhaps the unique thing that they have is a very crypto native distribution angle, and people trusting Kobe as a bearer, or like the creator of this platform, whereas they might have trust issues with other crowdfunding platforms. Until you can really nail down what is the structural reason why you're onto something and no one else is. Some of my favorite structural reasons are most people think it's a very dumb idea, or like it's been tried a million times and it doesn't work, and so no one wants to try anymore. I'd be, again, very paranoid about what it is that you're building. I remember meeting the Pump Fund guys like quite early in their journey and thinking it was like a really dumb idea. I almost felt bad for them. And now it's like one of the most successful companies, like probably of like all time. And so until you get that kind of response, and I would test again anonymously, speak as if this is a hack from Alchemy's founders, speak as if it's someone else's project, and almost try to deride it and encourage a negative response from the receiver, just to really see like what their true opinion of the thing is when there's a social pressure from you to kind of degrade it. Then it's when you realize like where people really have problems and they're willing to deprioritize everything else that they have going on in their busy lives because the problem that you're solving is so important to them. Be careful of distractions. So 2 years going down this rabbit hole, realize that a lot of the pain points are in compliance and in touching the fiat world. And one of the structural advantages that we have as a crypto company or as a payments company is that crypto culturally is very cypherpunk. Like no one wants to do compliance, and like we're all trying to get rid of the banks, and like we're all trying to like create a beautiful peer-to-peer transfer world. And so it starts to make sense why traditional payments people have a problem doom scrolling through CT 8 hours a day, because they have like families and normal lives or whatever. And then on the flip side, the crypto natives like don't really want to think about compliance. They don't want to get a SOC 2 certification. They don't want to go through the various examinations that is required for nation states to give you the permission to move in it or to hold other people's money or to temporarily trade against them in exchange for a fiat equivalent of a crypto asset. So that's something that we can easily point to today, and it doesn't really seem like that deficiency is going away anytime soon. Maybe it does. And if it does, then we have to figure out another structural deficiency. Otherwise, there will be a race towards zero as people crowd out the idea. And again, something to be very paranoid about. Another advantage that we had at the time was like literally just moving to LATAM and figuring out, because so many of the people who had reached out to us were from this region, many times not even speaking English, developing the relationships that were required to win their trust. And to convince them to take the leap and start, downloading Phantom, like understanding what a private key is, understanding how to, explain to their bank, their auditor, their regulator, all of their existing customers, what is this crazy crypto stuff that you're starting to use after one of the great financial, crimes of human history has just occurred. Second, third order consequences beyond what you're working on, how it's received, and the other considerations that your customer might have for trying something. Or we've learned the hard way that these are quite important. And again, structural deficiencies. LATAM, in addition to other emerging markets, about 10 years late to the 50% internet penetration mark. If you go on the ground, you can start to see like, hey, e-commerce and fintech are really starting to take off. The impetus for them to like gamble on things like crypto culturally in a place like Brazil just isn't there. They might gamble on like gaming and sports and esports, but like for some reason people don't really want to gamble on crypto. And so it starts to make sense that, hey, maybe the equivalent of like a really smart kid here from Brazil-Stanford, like maybe there's a good reason that they're not working on this. Maybe it's the distribution of talent. Maybe it's the fact that it's a really big country. Maybe it's because there's just not a lot of working capital to fund these ventures, and it's really difficult to convince Silicon Valley to fund because they don't speak Portuguese generally versus English. But these types of again structural deficiencies are what I'd really try to pinpoint when you're building the conviction to work on the thing that you're building. That's another really good way to not die. Because then there's a very good reason why people want to pay you money to solve their problem. And they will continue to pay money so that way you don't run out of money and your company doesn't go bankrupt. So I'll describe that as the second principle, which is really hone in on the structural deficiencies. And the more outside of your product scope, the more outside of your immediate sphere these structural deficiencies are, probably the more you're onto something real, because the things that seem very disconnected to you may not be so disconnected. We had no idea when we first submitted the hackathon project that we'd be going to this region, we'd be spending so much time there, we'd be with our clients, their families, their friends, building trust within these communities. And we had no idea that like culturally they had some the attitudes that might discourage them from like going on, Pump Fun and buying meme coins. And it almost seems random when you think about what is discussed on places like CT or in Telegram, which is like what coins are going up, what coins are going down, what's the latest tribalism between different virtual machine communities, what's some macro news that like people are talking about. It's almost like a paradox. You both need to pay attention because there are nuggets of alpha that occur, and depending on what you're building, this could even be your entire customer base. But at the same time, if you're seeing it, so is everyone else. And there's so much noise that occurs that you need to actively filter out without losing your mind. And so, a couple of the founders I've had the fortune to know over the last few years, I think like one surprising nugget is like you really have to pick the hill that you die on in terms of the customer set that you service. And the more that you really consider the structural deficiencies that identify why no one else is building the amazing thing that you are, the better of a understanding that you might get about ultimately who you're breaking your back to service and how you're making their lives easier. Sometimes you have to fire your customers, and sometimes you have to, all the time you have to really like the customers that you're servicing. Otherwise, you'll lose your mind. Without really considering why you found something that no one else has, it's very difficult to really get who the end audience might be. So I'll pause there on that second principle. The last lesson I'll share before maybe seeing if there are any questions at this point for how not to die is to think this is more of a recent thing and hopefully helpful to you guys. We now are size 32. We hire people from all areas of the world: America, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, Singapore, Europe. When team building, what I've learned is that there's like the Silicon Valley meme of like two coders in a basement or in a garage that just like try a lot of things and then eventually like one hits. And again, it really depends on what you're building, which is a little tragic because I can't give very specific advice until you tell me that you're building in DeFi relative to maybe consumer relative to some very regulated space. But the people that you recruit, I'd be very considerate of how well they work together versus what are their individual pedigrees, maybe is like a good way to describe it. It's very tempting to hire someone who seems perfect. But what's weird is if like they've already built what you've built or what you're trying to build before, maybe they're like not that excited to build it again. Or maybe they're a little bit more arrogant when they build it, which like turns off the other people that they have to work with when they try to build it. Maybe it's actually not a good idea to get that L6 from Google who's just done Google their whole lives because they're more uncomfortable taking risk. And when prices go down and you're building a DeFi product, they're very scared of what will happen and they start looking for other jobs. These like almost emotional considerations are quite interesting. Probably less relevant during the whole search PMF phase. Hopefully you already have like a good founding team. But if not, that's definitely the thing that you should focus on. But if like it seems like the thing that you're building is working, I'd really think more carefully about the composition of the second order attributes, like their emotional disposition, culturally, what are their preferences, how does engineering interact with product? If you have a dedicated product person, how crypto native are they is another great question. Depending on the market that you're in, you might get a lot of leverage, structural leverage, from trying to teach crypto to a Web 2 person who has like a great background in what you need, but might not get the whole doom scrolling and like Pepe frogs and Telegram, instant responses that the industry does. On the flip side of that, maybe like if you're building like a broker dealer, basically, or like a proxy broker dealer, maybe the crypto growth person is like absolutely fantastic for generating engagement, but like your end customer like doesn't actually care. And what they want is someone who's like an expert in dealing with securities and infosec and privacy, and it's at that point where I'd be very careful of the temptations that lead and that come from like people giving you a false sense of product market fit because they're not the direct customer set that's paying you, but they want to support you, or they think what you're building is very cool, and it almost makes you believe that this will lead to a group of people who will pay you money to get access to your product. We have run into that so many, I can't even tell you the individual instances because it's just happened more than I'd care to admit. But you know, and it's not like you want to get rid of people who might not use your product to the same extent, and therefore not generate the fees that I don't know a large oil tanker company might do. But to make the comparison concrete, if like 30 people ask you for an update to your front end because it's a little bit confusing, but the net fee generation for them is like, I don't know, $50, and like an oil tanker guy like seems to or like pick whatever, I don't know, maybe you're operating in DeFi, and so like you're trying to please a large LP that like represents a family office. I don't know. The real fee generator like doesn't actually care about that front end change, and actually like wants something that seems strange as a feature. This is when like the amount of information that you're intaking ends up becoming a priority queue, and like you actually have to start making some hard decisions on what is like the expected value of building something. Until there's a great temptation to just like build whatever people ask for, and while you're like still early and like your code base is still like not very messy, and you're still trying to like poke around the maze and see like where you're getting the most traction, it's very tempting to try and do everything. But usually there's a long tail of customers who really deliver most of the value for you. And it's emotionally difficult to kind of prioritize them because you never know a priori like what the broader world will want when you get to venture scale. But I'd be very honest with yourself as well about making sure that you objectively weigh the utility function for customer set A versus customer set B, because oftentimes it comes from places that you don't expect. And the ones that really make sure that you don't go bankrupt might not be, for example, as loud on CT, and therefore it might really feel like what you're doing at a given moment is the wrong thing because they're not complaining as vocally. But in retrospect, that customer who's not saying as much but brings you most of your fees or your volume or your TVL or what have you, like that's who you really want to focus on. I think like as we've grown from this like USD stablecoin thing that seems to be working very well, and I found very weird types of customers where like the trade-off is really onboarding and educating them, and have gotten increased requests for the first set of products that we built that it turned out the market like kind of wanted but like didn't really want. That's an active trade-off that we've had to consider. And you only have so much time, and your code base is only going to get messier. So make sure that you pick your tech debt wisely, and the cleaner and earlier you can make that cut, it's going to feel very hard, but with conviction, the same way that you had when you picked your original idea, or area that you decided to spend your time poking around the elephant on. I would strongly encourage you to take that same conviction when picking your ICP, or ideal customer profile. I've had to learn a lot of these 3-letter abbreviations from up to people, but some of them end up being quite useful. Those are probably 3 of the most important things that I've taken away in how not to die. And if you want to be very smooth brain about it, all 3 lessons kind of like coalesce into you're a group of people from first principles, super smooth brain. Maybe you've raised some money, which is subsidizing your current bouncing around the idea maze. But fundamentally, you need to convince some amount of people in the money, whether it's directly or indirectly, to give you money so that way you can continue to pay your salaries. At some point, health benefits and all the other things that go into running a business. And until you get a very sober look at what those people are, by archetype, by region, by price sensitivity, and the founding team market fit maybe is a good way to describe it, for like whether or not you even like the people that you end up servicing, whether or not you have some unique insight about the market that you're servicing, because a personal background is usually what I try to filter for. maybe one could make an argument. You can believe a lot of things these days. Just look at some of the older virtual machines. Maybe one could make an argument that you're finding that like I kind of like them, but I don't like super love them. Maybe I can just tough it out and get like an exit. Like there are like a lot of like these types of thoughts. I just like kill them early because it only gets worse as the code gets more confusing to debug. And like the total expanse of people coming and asking for feature requests or bug reports or for what end up kind of like becoming internal pivots gets larger. Getting a question, what's the fastest way to determine market fit? So there have been so many times where I've wondered whether or not we have product market fit because it seems like some people like the thing. And today, there's too many requests coming in where I have to like it hurts. I have to actively ignore inbound. I have to actively not read a Telegram message. I have to actively ignore an email. I have to actively ignore, a potential opportunity if we do XYZ on product. That's the litmus test for product market fit. So how do you get there? I would build embarrassing versions of things where you feel like there is a thesis for people wanting it. And the easiest way to understand that is this a problem that you personally have? If you try to build for an audience that isn't like you or isn't like very similar to you in some respect, they don't like if you yourself, and maybe is a different way to put this, have the problem that you're trying to solve, then it's like quite difficult to empathize with the potential customer as much as you could if you did have that problem. So I think carefully about your founding team and what is the unique, maybe where you're from. Maybe it's like the things that you like to do on chain. Maybe it's like the people that you interact with on chain or on CT or in Telegram. I think very carefully about, is there like a common problem that I have with this customer set? Because if you build for someone else that you're not and no one on your team is not, it's a very hard way to build something great for them. Embarrassing MVPs. Please don't spend 6 months building something that like looks pretty because it's a very good way to waste time. Make something super, super embarrassing and just send it to people who hopefully, if you know, in an anonymous fashion. And if you don't know, that's fine. You can just send it to them. And, use analytics tracking platforms or, you probably don't even need to do that. You can just see if like there's activity on your thing. See how much like they actually like using it. How much pain are they willing to deal with through this very embarrassing version of your app to use it? Because then you'll see very quickly whether or not it's a hair on fire problem. Like literally your hair is on fire and you need water and you need to turn it out. Or if it's kind of like, that's cool. If it's in that latter category, you're probably not onto something and you're going to have to pivot it. For your product idea feature, I don't think that changes my response. The weird thing, man, is that like some ideas that are like really good, you only get to if you are delusional about people like loving your thing when they only kind of like mildly like it. And so that's an exception that proves the rule. It is a very painful path though. And so I wouldn't broadly recommend it in the same way I wouldn't broadly recommend, the average human being should trade perps on leverage because it's a very good way to lose all your money. But, there are exceptions that prove the rule. There are, profitable leverage perp traders. But general advice is to see if the hair on fire problem is real before you dedicate serious resources to it. And the good news is that the worse your MVP is, the easier it is to tell if they're willing to walk on fire to use your thing. Maybe like a related thing, as I thought about like what would be useful to tell you all, is what I'd like to call the 12-year-old test. And so much of crypto fails this 12-year-old test. Imagine you're explaining your thing to a very smart 12-year-old, maybe not even that smart. They're like barely literate. If you can't, maybe try this with like your cousin or like your niece or your nephew or something like that. If you can't explain your idea the problem that it solves and why it's valuable to like a smart, barely literate 12-year-old, it probably is not as real as you think. People have variations of this. My friend, probably a Solana dev that you guys know, calls this like the smart high schooler test. I can do this for Sphere just as like an example. Some people can't get dollars, and dollars are the best currency. So we help people get from their currency to dollars, and we help them move their money from where they are to other places, which is sometimes very hard. Like that's the 12-year-old version, and it like kind of makes sense, right? I'd really encourage you to try and do that for yourself. I've seen so many like leveraged Lego block products where it's like, well, if you do this and then you do that and then you do this and then you do that, it's like 8 steps later. Like even a PhD in financial mathematics is like hella confused, and like you get 10.8% APY. Be very careful. Like that, I don't know if that's real. If your like technology product is dependent on number going up, be very aware that when number is not going up, it's going to suck a lot. And when number goes back up, maybe you should do a TGE. But I don't encourage like token exit scams. It's a good way to become depressed for the rest of your life. Yes, smart 12-year-old test. Please do this a lot. Even when we come across products today or doing vendor evaluations, or there's a founder that I'm trying to help, I feel like half of the time I'm just telling them to make it even simpler and even dumber. Pretend like like I'm really, really dumb. Explain it to me like I'm really dumb, because otherwise I'm not going to get it. And what's weird is that if you go up the totem pole and you find someone, I don't know, Larry Fink, right, who's like hella busy and probably has like a couple of brain cells to allocate towards you, like even he's going to be looking for a very simple answer. So 12-year-old version is very bullish. Looks like we have 5. I'll stay on for like 5 more minutes just because I was late. It looks like we have like 10-ish minutes here. Does anyone have any questions about the 12-year-old test? It's a really good test. Otherwise, I'll try to think of something else useful for me to tell you. Maybe as a disclaimer, I'm just a guy. Like my company isn't even that successful in the grand scheme of things. So like really take what I say with a grain of salt. Maybe some of this is useful, maybe it's not. What helps you prioritize important tasks when you're overwhelmed? Great question. It's a very good question. I played a lot of League of Legends. Terrible game, ruins lives, and it's very overwhelming as a game. And so it forced me to kind of do a variation of this 12-year-old test. And you start to realize that like the most important things for you to work on are a function of both time and complexity. If there are things that you have to do in the next 5 minutes, all you have to ask yourself is, how important is it for me to do? Or on the flip side, what happens if I don't do it? And when you get like a raw breakdown, bullet point list of the mechanical actions that you have to take in a given day, based on a very smooth brain understanding, it starts to help build up the rules of that priority queue, and it values certain actions. If you find yourself finding it difficult to like weigh what a certain behavior or an action might lead to, that's probably like a good reason to deprioritize it, because it being hard to like evaluate is in of itself copium if you decide to do it. You know, kind of like portfolio diversity, there are some like long tail bets that you should take, because what if, right? If it works out, it's an insane benefit to you. You should definitely sprinkle some of those in. But if you're otherwise asking yourself, like, what is the value of me taking this call? Because you know, that's going to happen a lot in Web3. Like people are going to want to do partnerships, which is probably like a marketing psyop. And like there's like, I don't know if there's like a real translation to like paying customers. If it's like, well, I have to really, you know, spend the next 5 minutes thinking about like what is the upside for me taking this call, probably don't take the call and go do something else instead. It could literally be like meditating or just like relaxing, and it's probably a more efficient use of your time, getting not overwhelmed. I won't even go into like external life sort of like stress relievers. That's something you guys probably already know or like can Google. But one sort of realization I've had recently is like maybe ruthless isn't the right word, because it kind of sounds brutal. But sometimes maybe like objective is a better word. You have to like really objectify. Sorry, that word's probably loaded. You really want to like be careful about how you define your utility function to your company, not just yourself, and put inputs like tasks and be able to quickly determine whether or not it's high, like it generates a lot of utility for you or not, and that utility can exist across many dimensions: potential BDOP, potential relationship, potential product expansion or insight or unique expansion, and think strategically about whether this bet is worth making. And in some senses, you're taking a lot of mini bets throughout the day with how you spend your time. If you don't realize this, maybe you should. Maybe this is something useful that I can say. If what you're working on is truly a good idea, even if no one else is in the world at that time is working on it, you're in a race. Because as soon as someone else realizes that it's a good idea, then they will create a variation of it. It is inherently competitive, even if no one else in the world is doing it. And if your goal is to produce, I don't know, aggregate utility for the world, maybe you like don't actually care. But if your goal is to not die, then maybe you should. Hopefully that kind of answers your question, Dimitri. I'll tell you guys something that I found recently useful. There is a country where someone offered us an incredible entry point into that country. This person we didn't think really understood the details of what they were talking about. And so we ended up rejecting that entry point. And it turns out that not only we thought that, and a lot of other people thought that, and it was actually a very bad entry point into that country. One filter that I use today to like evaluate opportunities is to try and think about how well the other person listens. The best salespeople don't really even talk that much. When I'm hiring, I try to really stress test if I give this person the opportunity to talk about maybe a subject that they don't know as much as they present themselves as knowing. Is there alpha and seeing whether or not they really take the time to listen and understand the assumptions that are being made. Why do I tell you guys this? Because it's a very useful way to filter out whether or not people actually want your thing. Like really listen and don't just like take them at their word, because humans, especially if, like you've seen them face to face, will like try to be nice to you. And they don't want to tell you that your thing sucks. I wish if like someone told me that Stripe for crypto was a terrible idea and that no one would pay me when I first started, I would have saved a year of my life. So I wish more people had told me in a brutally honest way. But when you're talking to potential customers and it feels like you're begging them to look at your thing, really listen, really think about their incentives, really think about what are the words that they're choosing to use, especially if they're busy. They probably don't have that much time to really think about those words either. And so you're seeing a certain slice of their gut reaction. Hopefully that's helpful. It'll help you it helps me like not waste time for certain opportunities. It helps me pick or make hires that like end up being really great because they can understand the customer really well. And early on in the journey, it helps you bounce around the idea maze faster. And what you're looking for right now is velocity, I think. Unless like you worked, I don't know, the uranium company, Uranium Digital, like those guys worked with uranium for a really long time or something. And so like it kind of makes sense that they had the insight. I mean, how many other people in the world are in that Venn diagram of uranium and blockchain? But if you're more in like the let's see what works phase, maybe it's because of youth. You're like 18 and like, I don't know, you've only lived so many years and you're from like New Jersey. If you're not from New Jersey, there's probably some unique insight. I don't know, let's say you're from Kazakhstan. There's probably some unique insight on the ground that you have that not many people from Stanford have. But if you're like just from New Jersey and you're 18 and you just haven't lived that much life, my advice would just be to go really fast. Velocity matters more at this stage. More shots at bat, the more likely you're going to poke the elephant, and it's going to poke back, and it's something amazing. Um, uh, uh, um, yeah. Think about how easy it is, guys, to like lose money in markets, and it's because the market is like an elephant, and it's going to like tell you what the aggregate sum of people's sentiment, which leads to order flow, which leads to price discovery, actually is. It's the same thing for product discovery. You're basically seeing whether or not people in mass or some slice of the world like really wants your thing. And so, you want to poke the elephant as quickly as humanly possible and poke it from all different angles. Because if you only pick one or two or three shots at bat, it's a very good way to die. Looks like we are at 103. Yeah, I'll pause here in case there are any questions. I think I'm running out of useful things to say. So, if you're here, thanks for listening. I hope this was a good use of your time. Oh, maybe last useful thing that I can say. When we first fundraised, we were shocked that people were willing to give us money. It almost felt like we had to beg for it. It felt a little weird. And your mileage may vary. What I'm about to say, probably a lot of people disagree with, which is kind of why I like it. You're young, you're smart, you're spent, or maybe you're not young. I don't know. Clearly, like you're in this call on, I don't know, is it Tuesday today or something? Like you're in this call and you're listening to this dude, and you're doing stuff with Coliseum. So like ambition or I don't know, drive is like above the median or whatever. Be careful about the capital that you take in. If you build cool stuff, and there are a ton of hacks to like sustainably build cool stuff if it's just you and like a partner or a couple of partners. We raised like more than we needed to our first round because like everything was failing. Like Solana was at $8. I was like, oh well, we don't know when the world will come back. Money there's a lot of money in the world. You want to make sure that the people, who like legally have ownership in this thing that you're going to be spending 80 plus hours on a week, and they're probably going to be spending like an hour thinking about, if that, maybe like 15 minutes. You want to make sure those people are helpful to you, or not. But I think that like sometimes like just letting you drive is super helpful. Sometimes being like almost like an emotional therapist is super helpful. But just be careful if you're going to go fundraise. Like literally, you're going to be spending 80 hours plus every waking moment, hopefully, of your life on this thing. And whoever's giving you capital, they're probably giving capital to others, or they have like full-time jobs and lives and kids and families. They're going to be spending a much smaller fraction of that time thinking about what you're thinking. And so be very careful about who you give that privilege to, because it is a privilege, frankly. And legal laws and like capital markets are just like kind of funny and kind of linear, and maybe that isn't correct, but I'm no philosopher. Yeah, it's probably the last useful thing that I have. I'll like pause here and thank you all for showing up. If it's interesting, send me a message on Telegram or Twitter. If you want to on or off ramp, you know where to find me. It's very cheap.
Arnold, thanks so much for taking the time today. There's a lot of little nuggets people could take out of that, the lessons learned. Hopefully they won't repeat many of the mistakes that you did. And just again, thanks. And yep.
Thank you all for your decks for Coliseum. Make it super simple, please. I feel like 90% of the advice that I give while looking at decks as a judge is just like make it really simple. 5 words, 10 words max per slide. Very simple. It's bullish. Inshallah.